as Mike matures and develops and gets older and finds more of his voice. And I think part of him doing that stuff is really just seeking information, talking about it with his coaches, using his sources that he has available to him based on our organization, where he's been, everything else.
He has a good supporting cast to help him out every single day, and he doesn't have to worry about MEs and stuff like that around him. Like, he has guys that are committed to the plan as he is.
He was thrown into the fire last year, and we got like live reps without even doing much, so that gave me a lot of confidence regardless of anything. And he's a gamer, so I know when he's out there, he's going to make the right choices in the right place.
Indeed, Penix took over the starting gig from Kirk Cousins in Week 16, and he wasn't afraid to push the ball downfield. Over the final 3 weeks of the season, the only quarterback with more completions and yards on passes at least 20 yards downfield was Minnesota's Sam Darnold. And it was a limited sample size, but Penix averaged more than 10 air yards per attempt last season. Among quarterbacks with at least 100 passes, only Indianapolis's Anthony Richardson averaged a higher rate. So, Mina, it's Penix's show now there in Atlanta. What do you want to see from him as he heads into year 2?
Yeah, what we saw from Penix last year is really what we saw from him in college. He has a cannon, right, attached to his left shoulder. We knew that. It's reflected in those stats. Boy, did it show up on the field, and it was quite a contrast to Kirk Cousins. His ability to just throw to any part of the field was remarkable and is his greatest attribute. Where he needs to get better, there's a few things, but one thing that I think is really important is he has to throw more to the middle of the field. Only 44% of his throws were between the numbers. That was the second lowest rate in football, behind only Justin Fields last year. And they have to be able to access that part of the field, especially if it's a play-action-centric offense, as I think it will be. So if he can improve in that regard, I think this passing attack can really take off because it'll be a little bit less limited, as a result.
Yeah, Mina, I see it similarly. The other area is durability. He had massive challenges with durability all through his college career. But if he could stay healthy and this core can stay healthy, this is a top 10 offense. Kirk Cousins was sacked about seventh least amongst all quarterbacks, so that bodes well in terms of what the offensive line can be. And you look at Darnell Mooney, averages over 15 yards a catch. Drake London, he's had over 15 touchdowns in his career. Hopefully Kyle Pitts can get back to where he was as a rookie. And obviously with Bijan Robinson, they could run the ball. So they have pieces all through their skill sets. So the big key is, can he take the second-year leap that most quarterbacks do with the full off season with Zach Robinson? And most importantly, can he get through 17 games?
Jeremy, what's going on with Kyle Pitts right now? There's some heading into the last year of his contract, some talk that he could be traded. What do you know?
Well, Dan, Atlanta seems to be open to the possibility of trading Kyle Pitts at this point. They won't force the issue, but as one source told me, if there's a good enough offer, this will probably get done. And so Kyle Pitts is not requesting a trade. I'm told he's open to staying in Atlanta. It's nothing of that matter. It's just he's at least thought about the options because, they haven't had the best quarterback play over the years with what he's had in Atlanta, and he's probably going to be the third or fourth option this year. He's in a contract year, so a new change of scenery could be welcome.
Yeah, Jeremy, that makes no sense to me. Here's a team that gave up a first-round pick next year to draft James Pierce. Obviously, this is a huge year. They were disappointing by only winning 8 games a year ago, and it just seems inconsistent to me with everything else they've done this offseason to trade away a player that, again, he's been inconsistent given some injuries and otherwise, but I would certainly hold on to him. You exercise the fifth-year option. Doesn't mean you have to give him a long-term deal, but that would surprise me if they would trade him at this point in the offseason.
They'd also be selling low, right, Mike? I mean, he's coming off of his worst season as a pro, and there have been highs that have been tantalizing. We feel a little bit like Lucy with the football when it comes to Kyle Pitts, though, because the second you start thinking, okay, this is going to happen, the reason why he was drafted where he was, and then he just disappears for games. I'm in agreement with you. It doesn't seem to match their timeline per se. However, if for some reason some team looks at him and still thinks, man, that talent is there and he can be that explosive, seam-stretching tight end that we think he can be, then I think Atlanta has to consider it because it would be good to recoup some draft capital that's sorely needed after the trade this year.
Who would that team be? I mean, like if they decide they want to move on, like is there a team or two that makes sense to you for him?
The Chargers are the team I associate with every tight end, but this would be a bit of an odd fit in some ways because, they seem to want players who can block, which is not really Kyle Pitts' game. That said, as more of a pass-catching tight end, he does pair well with their existing group. Will Dissly's a very good blocker, and they do need more verticality, which he would bring to that offense.
Pitts entering the final year. June 2nd, which is a big day, could potentially be traded now that June 1st has come and gone. Let's stay in Atlanta where we were before with Kirk Cousins, Jeremy.
Dan, you got me excited about post-June 1st. That was a great breakdown. Kirk Cousins, the Falcons can now save $27.5 million on their cap if they trade him, but the cap is not the issue. It's that money is guaranteed along with $10 million in 2026. No team wants to cover a big portion of that. Atlanta seems to be holding out hope if they're going to trade him that somebody will pay that big money. But as one source told me, if they were willing to take like $7 or $8 million on an offset on that contract, then a trade would have been done months ago. Maybe even the Cleveland Browns before they added 18 quarterbacks to their quarterback room. There's just not a market right now outside of maybe Pittsburgh as a plan B if they don't get Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, Pittsburgh's the only team that really makes sense to me, and it makes sense only under a certain set of conditions. If you could promise me that Kirk Cousins looked more like he did at the end of his tenure in Minnesota as opposed to last year coming off the Achilles, then I would go all in because that version of Kirk Cousins, the quarterback who could run under center play action, is a good fit for Arthur Smith's offense. But can he do that? Obviously, he could not in Atlanta. So you would want to know a bit more about his health if you were Pittsburgh, and I don't know how much they can know in the current circumstances.
Mina, I think he's a much better bet for Pittsburgh than Aaron Rodgers. He's 5 years younger. He actually played better, in my opinion, than Aaron Rodgers did. And one thing you can do under the rules is you can bring a player in for a physical in contemplation of a trade. So if I'm Pittsburgh, I'm trying to get Kirk Cousins in for a physical. And look, Jeremy alluded to it, guys. These are hard deals to get done because not only are you negotiating draft choice compensation, but you also have to come to an agreement on who's paying what in terms of the guaranteed money, and obviously that's going to be a big hurdle to overcome.
Cousins had shoulder and elbow injuries he suffered in Week 10, wasn't the same after that, so we'll see where that goes as the offseason moves along. Dolphins have been up front about the idea that Jalen Ramsey won't be on their team this year. What are you hearing on him?
Yeah, Dan, I'm hearing that the Miami Dolphins are still engaged with multiple teams on a trade for Jalen Ramsey. There is some optimism that something could get done. Money here an issue too, $24 million in guarantees, so perhaps they can split the difference with a new team. The LA Rams have been involved. To what extent is still unclear. I haven't sensed that they're getting this over the finish line right now as of yet. So it's been quiet on that front. Seattle's a team that kind of interests me because they've been looking at a lot of the veteran free agent cornerbacks left. They wanted to draft a cornerback in the first 3 rounds, didn't. So that could be an option as well. Somebody's got to step up and cover that money, but this should get done in the coming weeks.
Yeah, Jeremy, like what we just talked about with Kirk Cousins, there's 2 negotiations that have to go on with guaranteed money. Draft choice compensation, and then who's paying what. And now that it's been out there publicly, if I'm the Rams or some other team and I want Jalen Ramsey knowing that Miami's going to eventually trade him, I'm not going to move a lot on the guaranteed money, and I'm sure that's one of the reasons this is going to take a while to get done. And I know we're all in the dot connecting world, but I think going back to the Rams makes a ton of sense. They were the team that probably played Philadelphia the best in the postseason. Adding Jalen Ramsey, who probably has 2 years left at a high level, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, the Rams, to me, not only have the relationship, but they also have the need, Mike. Looking at this roster, I was actually a little bit surprised they didn't upgrade at cornerback because it does stand out to me as the weakness on this depth chart. And if he were to return to the Rams, I'd be interested. They could use him inside, similarly to how they did back when he was on the Super Bowl team playing the star position. He gives them some versatility. He's excellent against the run. He's a terrific tackler. So I feel like that reunion is something we could definitely see happen because it makes football sense.
Staying with the Dolphins, there was some noise earlier this offseason around Tyreek Hill. Is that a guy that could get traded, Jeremy?
Yeah, Dan, I would be mildly surprised. Where Ramsey, you hear a lot about his trade market. You're not hearing a ton about Tyreek Hill. But now that it is in early June, the Dolphins can save about $15 million on their cap if they were to trade him. So it maybe makes it enticing given the problems he had there last year. There would be a market if they looked heavily into this. He's still considered a top 3 wide receiver from most of the teams I talked to, but he's saying all the right things publicly. It seems like he wants to be back in Miami. I expect that they can work something out. So probably Ramsey gone, Hill stays.
Yeah, Jeremy, earlier in the show, we discussed timelines and, why Kyle Pitts being traded seems inconsistent. I'd say the same thing here. A year ago, Miami extended Tua Tagovailoa, and when you think about how explosive this offense is when they're all out there and healthy with, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. So I'd be hard-pressed to see, you've invested in Tua. He's obviously your future. They've invested in the offensive line, which I think will be better this year. So trading Tyreek Hill to me just, again, would seem inconsistent.
Yeah, they extended Tua last offseason. They also extended Jalen Ramsey last offseason. We just talked about him being traded. So you never know what's going on down there in Miami. Mina, in a hypothetical world where Tyreek Hill were to be traded, who should be calling the Dolphins?
Yeah, I'm looking at teams that could use a deep threat. Once again, I will mention the Chargers, who I moved to with Kyle Pitts. I think that's the missing piece on that offense. So that makes sense to me. Elsewhere in their division, the Kansas City Chiefs. I don't see that happening, but there is a need there. Maybe things have softened over time. And then another team we talked about, the Atlanta Falcons, to me, especially, by the way, if they were to move on from Pitts, you got a big arm quarterback who likes to throw downfield, really like, Mooney and London, but they could use another receiver and another deep threat. And I actually think from a football perspective, that would make sense as well.
One other team I'll throw in there, which is if we're one player away and we're on a rookie contract, what about the Commanders? We're trying to close the gap on the Eagles. We added Deebo Samuel. We have Terry McLaurin. Why not add maybe the most explosive player in the NFL and take advantage of the fact that Jaden Daniels is still on a rookie deal?
Yeah, the Commanders weren't afraid to add this offseason, bringing in Deebo Samuel, Laramie Tunsil, so they're obviously in go-for-it mode. So that's three big names that could potentially be dealt now that June 1st has come and gone. Jeremy, take us through a couple more, starting with Jair Alexander.
Yeah, Jair Alexander, Dan, he's a situation where he and the Packers are still talking. They're trying to find some common ground on a potential reworked contract. They have not hit a sweet spot yet. Now, if they were to trade him or cut him, they could save $17 million on the cap, but there just hasn't been a lot of momentum to find a trade partner. I was told that Jair will honor his contract as it stands unless they can find out a new contract that makes sense for him. So right now they haven't done that, but I expect them to try to shake something out. They're particularly thin at corner without him. And then you have Bryce Huff of the Eagles. So this is a situation where I was told the 49ers were trying to make this work since March. They've had their eyes on Huff because of Robert Saleh coming in. He had success with him with the Jets. He can make him a full-time rusher, get the best out of him. The Eagles simply could not. And so a trade should go down here really any day. They'll probably split the money. It sounds like San Fran will cover about $8 million of his hefty contract. Then you got the Titans of Will Levis. We hit on him earlier. So right now there's not a lot of trade traction. He's on a rookie deal, so they wouldn't save a ton of money if they traded him, but they could save a few $1 million on their cap. But right now he's probably going to be QB2. Not a lot has changed. I think if there's a market that heightens for him, that they would look into it. But for now, there's not a lot of momentum. So it should be Cam Ward 1, Will Levis 2.
They say it's a slow time of year in the NFL, but obviously there's still a lot going on in terms of phone calls being made, potentially deals being made. You're